But it is time to hit social media for our hashtag segment. For that, we'd like to welcome in Landon Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com. And I have Jenny Horn here with me as well, fast market contributor. And as I said before the break, we're going to be talking additional retail company here. We'll be talking some Nike.
Yeah, sticking with our Lulu theme kind of from yesterday with the athletic apparel company. And this is a company similar to Lulu that has outperformed the broader market. I mean, they had a 32% gain in the last 52 weeks. They're on kind of a tear until this week when they announced that the Vaporfly could face a possible ban, of course, giving athletes this unfair advantage. But I think the stock is up. I mean, it's still in the green today, so it doesn't really seem to bother Nike. Nike seems to kind of be able to push through these different headwinds they have. So, Landon, as an overall company, what are you looking at with Nike?
Well, I got to say, as far as that Vaporfly ban, I think that's good news. I mean, that can't be a large percentage of their sales. And if you've got marketing material out there saying that you're giving athletes an unfair advantage so much so that it's considering being banned, that's got to drive sales up for the other markets like basketball and other types of running. So, but when we look at the data overall, Nike's doing really well. I mean, there's really only one way to put it. They're doing really well. I think they're about halfway through the current quarter, and this quarter's on pace for a very strong quarter. So it's looking at around plus 16% year over year, plus 7% quarter over quarter as far as purchase intent goes. Now, one caveat that we always talk about with LikeFolio data is that we're only measuring U.S. customers or English-speaking customers, actually. And so that's generally American customers. But you can see that last quarter there on the far right, the sort of shaded one with the red outline. That's the current quarter's pace where we think it will end up by the end of quarter. Very strong quarter over quarter and year over year. We know that last quarter they blew out numbers. They did really well. The market wasn't very impressed. It kind of traded basically flat the next day. So, I'm not sure what another strong quarter will do. It's tough reading those market expectations. But overall, Nike doing very, very well this quarter.
Yeah, we have a long ways until those earnings will be released. It looks like March 19th is when they're actually going to, release those numbers. But when we start talking about Nike, we always talk about how it is the end of earnings season, so that's no surprise. But I love your point about this may actually be good news to have kind of this negative media around this Nike Vaporfly, because you're seeing the stock 50 cents off all-time highs here. But this reminds me of that Zion situation where the shoe explodes on national TV, one of the biggest games of the year in NCAA basketball. And the initial reaction, of course, was a little bit negative for Nike, but they used that to advantage. And now Nike actually has signed Zion as the shoe deal. Of course, he hasn't actually played yet, but all the hype around him, they're able to use and manage those perceptions of quality and expectations around their products as well as anybody.
Yeah, I agree. And, if you're the guy that's in charge of Zion shoes for the first game, you're going to stress test the heck out of those and triple check them. But this is a different situation. This is where it's clearly giving athletes an advantage. So I think there's no wrong way to spin this to be positive. I mean, it's going to be good news for them. Maybe not for, sales for marathon runners. That may go down. But the perception of the company as a whole as creating an unfair advantage. If I'm an athlete, I want that unfair advantage. And so I think that's fantastic for them. And, all their brands are really doing well. Jordan brand, Converse brand, they're all up year over year, very strong. And especially when we compare those to like Adidas and Under Armour and Puma, they're not doing as well year over year as far as our purchase intent metric goes. So Nike's really taking control here. And I think a lot of it has to do with their direct-to-consumer sales. Their digital sales, their sneaker app or sneaker release platform, really doing well. This is a chart of direct-to-consumer purchase intent, just absolutely dominating, doing really well. And, the loser of this chart right here is Foot Locker, who is absolutely getting crushed on our data. Purchase intent year over year down around 20% because Nike's just going right around them direct to the consumer. So there's a lot of potential winners and losers off of this chart right here.
Yeah, so Landon, what's the difference really between the Nike app and the sneaker app? Because they're two different apps, correct?
Yeah, I think they're two different apps. Now, I wish I had my buddy Nick in here because he could probably go on for an hour about this. He's a sneakerhead, but I believe that the sneakers app is all about the release of the shoes, whereas the Nike app is more about buying the shoes directly. So, Alex, maybe you can chip in here and tell us if we're right or wrong.
I was hoping I could. I was looking at my notes here. I don't have anything on this, but I think that sounds right to me. Nike app's a little bit more of a lifestyle app as well, I believe. So obviously Nike's building that, similar to what we talked about yesterday with Megan around Lululemon, as they've done such a good job of taking advantage of trends and kind of creating that brand loyalty. I think Nike's done the same thing for even a longer period of time, especially in the running space and of course in basketball with brands like Jordan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for the core sports, the basketball, football, those kind of sports, I think they have a huge presence, and it's only growing. And like I said before, now that all of a sudden you don't have to go to the mall and get those. You can just get on the app, get direct to consumer from Nike, and that's going to hurt companies like Foot Locker.
Yeah, and I like both of your take that you think this Vaporfly thing is good, because I mean, of course, I haven't just seen that view. I've seen many different views of this, and people, of course, have all this outrage on social media about the Vaporfly possibly being banned. So our first tweet is from Ross Gerber, who says Nike Vaporfly shoes are better, and now they want to try to ban them from competition. Seems unfair that they make a better shoe to run in, so the competition wants to hold back the technology. So Landon, kind of exactly what you're saying. So it was this story, I mean, the stock dropped on this news. Do you think this was kind of the thing of like Tesla and the window shattering, like there's really no such thing as bad publicity?
Yeah, I guess, but I mean, it's almost like instead of the window shattering, the steel ball bounces off and hits Elon, and that's why it's a danger. Like, it's so good that you have to prevent people from using it, because I can't see this being a bad perception for the company. If people were breaking ankles and tearing ACLs when they wore these shoes, that would be really bad, and that's going to be a tough spin for the marketing team. But the fact that people are breaking records and the runners that are not wearing them are complaining and saying this is unfair, I think that's fantastic for the company as a whole. Obviously, for that brand, it may decrease sales, but until it's banned, if you're a marathon runner, you're going out and buying those shoes.
Yeah, at the risk of a bad analogy here, this kind of reminds me of like the belly putter in golf, where the people who weren't using them were saying they're unfair, and rather than just using them, they said, hey, let's just ban them so people have to use the regular putters like everybody else. But you also mentioned some stuff in there around other brand potential weakness, where you're seeing still some strength in Nike. Can you elaborate on that more? Is it really just Lululemon and Nike dominating this space, or are there companies like Under Armour and Adidas that are hanging in there, or is there general weakness?
Yeah, so I talked about Nike, where it's at right now. We're looking at this quarter's on pace for plus 16% year over year purchase intent. Adidas is down 23, Under Armour's down 4, Puma is up 6. And so clearly Nike is the one that's dominating here. Puma is the only one that's kind of hanging in. Adidas is the big loser so far, and then of course the other loser is Foot Locker, just because of the direct to consumer thing.
Yeah, it's funny, you can tell what's our wheelhouse, because this reminds me all of the way that Michael Phelps was banned from wearing certain swimsuits back in the Olympics. So you can tell, you talk about golf, I talk about swimming, so it's funny what's all in our wheelhouses. But our next tweet says, Nike had been moving nice recently. I'm sizing up my long position. Next target is 109s, but will trim soon at higher 104s. So Landon, I'm curious, because we talked about, of course, Lululemon yesterday, and now we're talking about like Adidas, Under Armour, Nike. But how does Lulu compare to a Nike? Because they both are this athleisure space, but it seems like they don't really steal market share from each other, because they're both doing so well.
Right. I mean, both of them are basically at all-time highs. They're absolutely dominating the market. And it's just a question of market expectations. We talked about how Nike crushed it last quarter and the stock was basically flat. And so it's really hard to understand exactly what analysts are expecting. But in the case of both companies, they're up considerably. I think you talked about earlier, up about 30% over the last 1 year for Nike. I know Lulu's up probably even more than that. So they're both crushing it. And it really just comes down to, can they continue to deliver and beat market expectations, which are going to keep going up and up and up. And so eventually something's going to have to break there. But, I'm not shorting at 104, that's for sure.
And Landon, kind of building on another thing that you said, is you briefly mentioned, we've talked about this countless times, both with you and Andy, regarding the kind of the Foot Locker, the second and third order effects in this space. And at some point with Nike at all-time highs, and even as things are clicking strongly, if you're looking at this from a risk-reward standpoint, if you're a little bit hesitant to get in a stock at all-time highs, what are the other things that we can look at as those second, third order effects, something like a Foot Locker, where maybe there's pressure as they move towards this, direct-to-consumer model?
So I would look, obviously Nike's doing very well direct to consumer. I would look at what are the other key brands for Foot Locker. Nike's a big one for them, but what are the other key brands and how does their direct to consumer game lay out? So if they start stepping it up, I don't know this data, but let's say that Adidas and Under Armour are big for Foot Locker. If they start stepping up their direct to consumer game, then it's an even better short opportunity for Foot Locker. Obviously, Nike's had a big effect on Foot Locker. And they're not going to be the only one. So I would look at that. I would look at the other brands, how strong their direct-to-consumer game is, and then also what is Foot Locker doing about it? Are they taking any proactive steps that can offset this a little bit and maybe get themselves back inserted into the conversation where people don't have to go to the mall to get shoes, and they can order them through Foot Locker directly, and it's more appealing than going to Nike.
Okay, so Landon, you said you won't short the stock at 104, but if you look at like the yearly chart, I mean, it's run up so far so fast. So at what point would you short it if it kept going on this trend?
I would need to see our data sort of shift. Right now, we've got quarter over quarter, year over year purchase intents higher than expected. One of the things that we measure at LikeFolio is sort of an unseasonal change or unexpected change, where we measure what the stock has done at this time in the year compared to the previous times. And right now, that signal is basically maxed out for Nike. It is almost as high as it can go. So I would need to see a strong shift from the consumer showing that they're no longer interested in buying Nike products as much as they used to be. Right now, the trajectory is not only up, but the pace of growth is also up. So I'm not getting bearish on this one for quite a while.
One thing I don't think we can stress enough too is as we start looking at U.S. data, you look at the Red Book numbers, you look at retail sales numbers, things are still strong for the consumer, it looks like, at least for the foreseeable future here. And then you look at Nike, the numbers are strong. Well, if the rest of the world's starting to pick back up and maybe the consumer picks up there, and you're seeing weakness in their competitors, to me, I'm just trying to draw connections logically. That looks like it would bode well for Nike, and I think that's basically what your bullish case is for Nike, even at all-time highs.
Yeah, I mean, there's, buy low and sell high is one strategy, but buy high and sell higher is another, and that works far more often. So at all-time highs, I'm not scared to go in long here. The data looks really, really strong. And again, going back to my earlier point about English speaking only, a lot of their success last quarter was based on worldwide sales, and their North American sales were sort of iffy. We've got quarter over quarter at plus 7%, and that's pretty much just measuring North America. So if they came in and said, you know what, worldwide's still doing well, but all of a sudden US is also picking up, that could really boost the stock.
Well said, Landon. Looks like earnings, like I said, March 19th, so I'm sure we'll talk some more Nike around that time. But great stuff as always, and have a great weekend.
Thanks a lot. You guys have a good weekend.
Thanks to Landon, co-founder of LikeFolio.com, and thanks to Jenny Horn as well.